Warning, this video may contain content that may not be suitable for children or anyone else that is easily offended. Strong language, graphic content, nudity, bad jokes, and a possible idiot, aka myself, may be featured in the following clip. Viewer discretion is advised. Channel is not responsible for any damages that you receive watching this video. Hey, what's up, y'all? It's Zems, and I'm back after 1 week, and here's another reaction video. This video is by Mr. Bond. It's called Don't Go Hiking in Japan's Bamboo Valley. It's interesting because I am in Japan, and I've never been to the valley. I've never heard of him having a bamboo valley, but I am intrigued. Thank you guys so much for all you guys that have been wishing me to get better and all that good stuff. I did have COVID. I didn't want to tell you guys that in fear of you guys getting scared of like, oh, are you okay? Or are you dying and stuff like that? But let me tell you, it sucked. That was probably the worst thing I probably felt. It was worse than any 24-hour virus that I've ever had. It was bad. I'm not trying to hype it up or trying to do like media scares or anything like that. It sucked. I was out for like a good 7 or 8 days before I was like even started feeling like myself again. It just felt like I didn't have control over my body. Everything I did, I was tired. I couldn't smell. I couldn't taste anything. I think that was like the worst thing between everything. Just not being able to taste. Like it was just bad. It felt gross because even though you knew what you were eating, you couldn't taste it. So it was just weird. It just felt like you was chewing something. I don't know. But I'm back and I'm ready to flex on all the haters. I'm gonna take this video and I'm gonna take it to soaring heights that no one ever seen. You see these 26-inch pythons, brother? We about to get into it, man. If you haven't already, make sure you swoop down in the description box, click on that link, and watch the videos in entirety, because I'm going to be pausing and stopping and talking through the whole thing. Let's get it. Still got it.
Today's story has a big twist at the end that has fascinated the internet for decades.
But before we get into today's stories, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, you need to come to the right place, because that's all we do. We upload 2 or 3 times every week.
So if that's of interest to you, please invite the like button over to your house for a pizza party, but then only serve them fermented herring. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. All right, let's get into today's story.
Let's go! SOS, someone help me.
Japan is comprised of 4 major islands. The northernmost island is called Hokkaido. And on Hokkaido, there is this beautiful national park called Daisetsuzan that is nicknamed the Playground of the Gods, because the park is basically all these huge mountains that stretch up into the clouds. The tallest mountain inside of this park is Mount Asa Hidake, which reaches an elevation over 7,500 feet, and it is a very popular hiking destination. The trail that brings you to the summit of Mount Asa Hidake is considered relatively straightforward. It's pretty much just a straight line. But there is one very tricky spot. On the way up, as you get closer and closer to the summit, the trees begin to disappear and you're left with this kind of open landscape where the trail becomes fairly ambiguous. It's hard to know where you're going. And so hikers are instructed to look for a landmark, which is this big square boulder that's known as Safe Rock.
SpongeBob.
Once you get to Safe Rock, apparently the rest of the trail is easy to identify and follow all the way up to the summit. There's a catch though. In the same area as Safe Rock is another large square boulder that looks exactly like Safe Rock. And this imposter is called False Safe Rock. If a hiker confuses False Safe Rock for the real thing and then attempts to take the path leading away from the imposter, they will be led down a path that many people have gotten lost on.
Nah, bro, red flags on the plate. Like, they need to put number 1 and number 2 or something so people can be like, okay, number 1, that's the right way, number 2 is not. No one's about to be sitting there like, that's Safe Rock. And other dude's like, no, that's Safe Rock right there. He's like, no, bro, that can't be. That's the unsafe rock. How do you know? It's square. But yeah, but this is Safe Rock because this one's square too. But yeah, it's not as square as this one over here though. Like, no one's about to be doing that, bro. I'm not about to play with my life. You need to put identifying signs out there so people can know which direction they're headed. Because if I see a square and I see another square, I'm just going to pick the square that I think is the most square. And then God forbid the weather does something to one and it breaks one of the rocks. And then you can't tell, like, oh, now that square is gone, this has to be Safe Rock. And that's the path that's going to take you to see Jesus Christ the fastest. Like, no, nobody's doing that.
At first, it will feel like you are making progress towards the summit of the mountain, but eventually the trail begins to gradually go downhill. Now, you would think that would be a fairly obvious red flag. If the trail is going down and you're trying to go up to the summit, that probably something's gone wrong here, you've taken a wrong turn. But put yourself in the mind of someone who's made this mistake. In their mind, they reached the landmark of Safe Rock, although it was the imposter, false Safe Rock, and so they think they're on the right path. And if this is their first time being on this mountain, which a lot of people it is, they'd probably convince themselves that they've gone the right way and just keep on going. So if you just keep on going and you don't recognize this mistake, about a mile away from false Safe Rock, you enter into this valley that's completely overgrown with thick bamboo. It's very swampy, and there's lots of very steep cliff drop-offs. And once you go inside of this area, you can't see anything because the bamboo is so tall and so thick, and so it's very easy to get turned around, and it's pretty easy to accidentally walk off of a cliff.
Hell no.
So over the years, hikers who have accidentally taken the trail leading away from false Safe Rock have gotten lost in this treacherous area, and not all of them have come back. In July of 1989, two men from Tokyo were hiking up the trail towards the summit of Mount Asadake when they reached what they believed was Safe Rock. However, it was not. It was false Safe Rock. And so when they followed the trail leading away from false Safe Rock, it was not long before they were lost in that valley overgrown with bamboo. That night, when these two men did not come home, their friends and family called the police, and a search was launched for them. Over the first couple of days, there was no luck. They could not find these two guys. They had no idea where they had gone. They looked all over this swampy area, thinking that's where they might be, but they couldn't find them. But then on July 24th, a helicopter was flying over the mountain over an area that had not really been thoroughly searched. It was just to the east of that valley with all the bamboo where they expected them to be. And this helicopter pilot, as he went around a corner, he got a view down to the midsection of the mountain, and he saw this big, wide open clearing. And right in the middle of this clearing are three huge letters. They are spelled using birch logs, and the three letters are SOS. SOS is an international code used to signal extreme distress. People who go missing or who get stranded somewhere, they will try to spell the three letters, SOS, as big as they possibly can, and then they will camp out near their signal in hopes that someone will see it and then come and rescue them. This helicopter pilot that's seen this distress signal immediately flew over the letters, expecting to look down and see the two missing hikers from Tokyo. But when he was hovering over the SOS and he's looking down, there was no one there.
SOS stands for, is it Save Our Souls or something else? That's always been told is Save Our Souls, but I could be wrong. Me personally, even though I'm not like an avid hiker, like I don't go on hikes a lot or anything like that, but if I'm supposed to go up and all of a sudden the trail goes down, me personally, I'm turning around. Or they could just hire someone to legit just sit there and then point people to the direction like, hey, you go this way, or take that side off, you get what I'm saying? So people don't go that way. Unless they're like an expert hiker and they're trying to get to somewhere down that way, they shouldn't be going that way, bro. You can save a lot of time and a lot of lives just by putting up a flag or a caution tape. But then again, knowing what we know from Mr. Ballin's stories and other content creator stories, people are going to go past that tape anyway. So but at this point, it doesn't even matter. Hopefully these people are still alive. I mean, they had to be out there for a long time to gather all that, I'm going to be assuming is bamboo to make that SOS sign, and then they left. So I guess they were sitting there for a long time, realized that nobody was coming or didn't search that side of the mountain, and then they just left and tried to figure it out on their own. Could have been pass or fail, but we about to find out.
Despite the fact that this was a wide open area, they are not in the Bamboo Valley anymore. But either way, he signaled to the rest of the search party that he had found their SOS signal, and before long, more helicopters and search teams were brought over to that area. And then several hours later, a search team that was on the ground, who was walking about 2 miles north of this SOS signal, saw these two very haggard-looking guys come out of the bamboo brush, and they come walking up towards them, and it turns out it was the missing men from Tokyo. They were very ragged, they were dehydrated and famished,
but alive,
kind of on the brink of death. But they were alive, and they were extremely happy to have been found. And so a helicopter was brought in, the two men were flown out to the nearest hospital, and then after receiving medical care, it was determined they would both make full recoveries. Excited by this news, the pilot and some of the other rescuers went to the men's hospital room to pay them a visit. And over the course of their conversation, the pilot brings up to the two men that they were really smart to build that SOS signal, that in fact, had they not built the SOS, it's unlikely anyone would have found them. And as soon as the two men heard this, they kind of reacted to it, they looked at each other, then they looked at the pilot and they said, "What SOS signal? We didn't make an SOS signal."
I know damn well someone else was not trapped down there, bruh. There is no way, bruh. If they didn't make it, then who did, bruh? Oh my God, that's scary. Or is it a tribe in there, bruh?
After asking the men several questions to make sure they really didn't make this signal, the pilot and the rest of the searchers said, we have to go back to the mountain. We have to go back to the SOS signal because somebody else has made it and they need our help. And so early the next morning, the searchers went back out to the mountain, back to the SOS signal to scour the area all over again. And shortly after they began this search, one of the searchers found this deep hole underneath the roots of a tree. And in this hole was a backpack. And in this backpack, amongst other things, was a driver's license and an audio recorder. The license belonged to a 25-year-old Japanese man named Kenji Iwamura, who 5 years earlier had been staying at a lodge near the mountain, and one day he had left, and on his way out, he had told the owner of this lodge that he was going for a hike to the summit of Mount Asadake. A couple of days later, when Kenji was supposed to check out of the lodge, he didn't, and so the owner went to his room, he knocked, but there was no answer, and so the owner used his master key, he opened the door, and when he looked inside, there was no Kenji, but all of his belongings were still there. And so the owner thought that was odd because the last time he saw him, he was going out for this hike. And so he put two and two together and thought, you know what, I think this guy's in trouble. So he called the police and reported him missing. A search is launched for Kenji, but Kenji was never found. And so there was always this mystery about what happened to him. Fast forward back to 1989, and these searchers are looking at this backpack. They've just looked at this license, and then one of the searchers reaches in and pulls out the audio recorder and hits the play button. What they heard was very disturbing. It was the sound of a young man, presumably, who was very distressed, who was calling out for help. And it's believed this young man is Kenji. In Japanese, he very slowly and deliberately says, "I'm stuck on a cliff, I can't move, SOS, please help me. I'm at the spot where I first saw the helicopter, but the bamboo is too thick, I can't move, please lift me up out of here, SOS." Here is a clip of the actual At this point, it seemed fairly obvious to police that based on the proximity of the backpack to the SOS letters and the fact that the recording, which was in the backpack, had Kenji literally saying SOS. He says this on the recording, that Kenji must have been the one who built this SOS sign. He must have built it back in 1984 when he got lost. And so now that the police believed they had solved the mystery of who built the SOS sign, they now needed to figure out where this person went. Where was Kenji? And so over the next several hours, searchers continued to look around the immediate area of where this backpack was found, and soon they would discover something that, according to police, solved this 5-year-old mystery. They figured out what happened to Kenji. Now, there is no official police narrative, at least not online, that explains step by step what happened to Kenji. So what I'm about to share with you is what I was able to deduce from all of the official reporting that I could find online. In 1984, Kenji left his lodge and headed for the summit of Mount Asahidake, and on the way up, he most likely mistook the false safe rock for the safe rock, and just like the two men from Tokyo would do 5 years later, Kenji went down the wrong path and got lost in that valley covered in bamboo. At some point, Kenji stopped trying to find his way back to the trail and instead tried to just go down the mountain any way he could. And so as he's making his way through this very thick vegetation and this bamboo, he eventually gets to a point where he lowers himself down over this ledge and he lands on this cliff. And as soon as he lands, he looks over the edge and he realizes he can't go any farther. It's too steep, it's too dangerous. But when he turns around to try to climb back up, it's also too steep. So he was trapped on this ledge. And so there on this cliff ledge, he sits and waits, hoping that someone has reported him missing and they will come and find him before he dies. And at some point, as he's sitting there waiting, a helicopter flies overhead. And Kenji most likely was elated. He probably believed they saw him and he thought he was going to get rescued. But the helicopter would eventually just fly away, giving no indication of whether they had actually seen Kenji. And so for what must have been at least a couple of days, Kenji sat on this ledge expecting this helicopter to come back, but over time he gradually came to the conclusion that that helicopter had probably not seen him and they were not coming back. There was no rescue party inbound for him. And so it was around that time, as he's having this horrible realization, that he pulls out that audio recorder and he records that very eerie and distressing message where he's calling out for help and saying that he's stuck on this ledge. And then after he was done, at some point, Kenji came to the conclusion that his best chance at survival was not waiting for some helicopter to potentially come back, because at this point that seemed really unlikely. Instead, his best chance and perhaps only chance was to try to climb down this cliff right in front of him that he already determined was way too dangerous. And so Kenji lowered himself and began climbing down this cliff, and miraculously, he got all the way to the bottom where the ground leveled off without serious injury.
He's a beast, bruh. Like, that's crazy. Like, I can only imagine, man. He built that thing 5 years ago. Like, you go climb through all that, and then you're stuck on a ledge, and then you're sitting there, then you're stuck there, helicopter flies over, and it's just like, you have no other choice. It's either you go up and try to climb up, slip and fall, or you kind of go down, you slip and fall. But luckily he made it through, and it's just like, I don't even know, man. Like, I don't even know what goes through people's head when it's just like a life or death experience. Because I know that one guy, I think it's like, I forgot how many hours it was, but his hand was stuck between a rock, bro. He was down there for days. Like, me personally, just thinking of it I don't think I could have done that. I would legit died down there. I don't know if everyone has that survival instinct or that moment where they're just like, you know what, I gotta do what I gotta do. If I get hurt trying to save my life, you know, I'm going to die here anyway, so I'm going to have to do what I have to do in order to survive. I'm praying that it's possible. Some people have been missing that long and survive, or shorter, but it survived. So hopefully he found something somewhere and got out, or he's still alive. I don't know. I'm wishful thinking at this point, but it's not looking too good for him.
And so from that point, he just kept on walking down the mountain, trudging through all this bamboo, until he actually leaves the bamboo and enters this huge clearing on the side of the mountain, where basically it's devoid of any vegetation besides some birch trees off in the distance. And it was in this clearing that Kenji would construct that SOS signal, believing that was his ticket out of there. But unfortunately, it was not. 5 years later, after searchers had just located Kenji's backpack underneath the roots of that tree, they would go on to make that huge discovery that solved the 5-year mystery. And that discovery was a partial human skeleton laying nearby. And eventually, that skeleton would be determined to be Kenji's. And at this point, the police said they were not suspecting foul play in Kenji's death. However, they did not release his exact cause of death. It's unclear if they just could not determine it or if they didn't want to release it publicly. Either way, we don't know what it is. And then after that, the police just closed the case and said, okay, we're done. But to the people who had been closely following this story, because this was a big deal at the time in 1989, they thought the police were kind of missing something. There was this obvious, huge discrepancy that they all figured the police were going to address at some point, and now it seemed like they weren't.
What?
And a lot of people felt like this is not a discrepancy you can just sweep under the rug. This is a really big deal. And that discrepancy was, how could Kenji have made that SOS signal? As a reminder, the 3 letters SOS that was found in that clearing, they were made with 19 birch tree logs. Each letter was 16 feet tall and 10 feet wide. And each log, each birch tree log that made these letters up, they were all about the same length and appeared to have been expertly cut, indicating they had been chopped with an axe or some other cutting tool.
Hell nah, bruh. Unless he was part Hulk or something, or part Thanos, bro. It's no way in hell. I thought it was bamboo sticks. I didn't know it was birch wood. Nah, bro. And you already tired from making that hike? There's no way. So who the hell built the SOS? So that mean I think that, I don't know, bro. I'm getting kind of nervous. I think it's more people. Or is it over time, each person was just, or a group of people got stuck down? I don't know. Let me know down in the comment section what you think. I feel like it's deeper than that, because that will take some time. You had to be there for a minute, unless it's more people down there that's dead.
And where this SOS was actually located in that clearing, it was several hundred feet away from the other birch trees. So on top of the enormous effort that would go into cutting down 19 trees with an axe, and I can assure you that cutting down a tree with an axe or a hatchet is way harder than you think it is. Kenji would have also had to expend a lot of additional energy just dragging the felled logs over to the area where he actually built the signal. Basically, this was a gargantuan task that even for someone who was fit and healthy and strong in the best of conditions, they would still struggle with this. And so the idea that Kenji, after being missing in the wild for several days, he's probably dehydrated, he's famished, he's tired, he's sore, he's scared, he's in the worst possible shape you can be in. The idea that he pulled this off is kind of unbelievable.
It's not.
And in fact, the person who did Kenji's autopsy would say that Kenji was not physically capable of putting together that SOS signal. He was just too weak. And there's another complication to factor in. There was no axe or any other cutting tool found anywhere near the SOS signal, near the skeleton, near the backpack, nowhere. There was no cutting tool. So either Kenji did have an axe and somehow mustered the superhuman strength necessary to chop down 19 trees, and then he built this SOS signal, in which case, why didn't the authorities find the axe? Or Kenji did not have an axe, in which case, why were there 19 perfectly cut birch logs just laying around in an area that virtually no one went intentionally? When the police just would not answer these simple questions about the axe, people began coming up with their own theories as to what happened. The most prominent theory was that Kenji was not actually alone. This would explain how he went about building that SOS signal. He had help. And it would also explain why Kenji's family, when they heard that audio recording for the first time, they said, that doesn't sound like our son. And so according to this additional person theory, that recording wasn't of Kenji. It was of this other person, this additional person. People who subscribe to this theory also point out that originally the skeleton was not classified as belonging to Kenji. It was classified as belonging to some unknown female with type O blood. The media and the public went crazy at this revelation, and very quickly the police were being hit with lots of questions about this development, which they had no idea what to say about it. And so they looked kind of bad in the media. They didn't have very many answers. They didn't have any leads. The pressure was building. And then all of a sudden the police say, oh, we looked at the bones again, and it turns out they were not type O blood female. They were actually type A blood male, which conveniently is the same sex and blood type as Kenji. Some say this was a pure fabrication by police to very conveniently tie up all the loose ends of a case they were doing a very bad job solving, that in reality, those were not Kenji's bones. Kenji's still somewhere out there. We haven't found him yet. And those bones belong to some unknown female with type O blood. And she was the additional person. But the reality is, even if this additional person theory is plausible, it's highly unlikely it will ever be looked at seriously by authorities, because at this point, the case is considered closed. So as of now, the only thing we can all say with certainty is that an SOS sign on the side of this mountain saved the lives of 2 men from Tokyo in 1989. But exactly who the sign builder or builders were, and then what happened to them, still remains a mystery for many people.
Dang, bro, that's crazy. Like, I just feel like they found the first pile of bones and was just like, yep, that's him. All right, buddy, pack it up and go. But at the same time, I don't know, I'm not a doctor, but all skulls are not the same size, right? Can't you just tell, like, people that are like, doctor, can't they tell the difference between a male skull and a woman's skull? Or we all have the same size skull, right? Or we don't, though. I don't think. I don't know. I'm not into that stuff. So you got old type blood, and then people like, wait a minute. Well, if that's old type blood, then that has to be. And then they're like, oh, they go back. Oh, wait a minute. No, it's not. I feel like they found a woman bones, and then they felt like people were bashing them and, you know, not finding the right person. And so they just said, oh yeah, we found the type A. I mean, it was an accident, so we're going to say it's him. No. And then another thing is, it's just like, even if it was a woman's bones, right? That still doesn't explain how 19 or whatever he said perfectly cut, which means you had to have a tool or a chainsaw or something. If they're perfectly cut like that, if there was just looking like the same how the picture was looking, then they had to have some kind of tool to cut each and every single one perfectly. And then the amount of strength it would take to carry, and depending on how big it is, bruh, I can't pick up no damn log. I picked up a log that was probably about like this big, bruh, and I was struggling with that myself. It's so many theories out there that I can't even think of. Like, even if I'm saying, like, if it was 3 people, I still don't think that's enough to make an SOS, bruh. Like, that's a lot of carrying, that's a lot of cutting. But one person might be doing the cutting, and one person might be doing the carrying, or they all was carrying it. But if she's down there and she died, if those 2 dudes almost died, and supposedly the parents said that's not their son's voice, and I'm 100% sure any parent can recognize their child's voice. And if they're saying that's not their child's voice, it's not their child's voice, bro. You can't tell me like, oh, that is my son. No, it's not. If I know what my son sounds like, you cannot tell me otherwise. Theory. But let me know down in the comment section what you think. But regardless, man, whoever did go down there and perish, man, you know, rest in peace. You know, living your best life, all that good stuff. My bet's on the Chupacabra, bro. The Chupacabra built the SOS, bro. You know what I'm saying? Maybe people back then built that sign just in case someone did get lost down there, and they can hang around that sign in the future, you know, because a lot of people get safe rock and unsafe rock or false rock confused. So they put that there just in case an individual does find it, they can sit there and wait for help. I don't know. But this video was by Mr. Ballin, man. Make sure you guys stop by and go show some support. Make sure you go subscribe to his channel. Also check out Mr. Ballin Shorts, his Reddit, his Twitter, and I think as well as Instagram and possibly Facebook. But yeah, man, that's going to do it. If you guys aren't already, be sure you swoop down in the description box, click on the link, and watch the video in entirety, because I was pausing and stopping and talking through the whole thing. If you guys are new to the channel, my name is Reprisalzems, and welcome to the crow's nest. But again, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Again, thank you guys so much for all the support you've been giving me while I've been gone. I greatly appreciate it.